Hey Ben, how you doing? What is your name? What are you doing? What is your problem?
Steve, as you said it, the name's Ben Albert. Happy to be here. I'm the host and producer of Real Business Connections Network. Very long story short, I had a marketing firm, still have a marketing firm, but I started to find that most my clients came through podcasting and social selling. So I took Real Business Connections, the podcast, and I'm building out a concierge. And quite literally, what we do is we book people on shows and we produce shows. So all our clients have to do is show up, talk about themselves and or ask questions, and then we're handling social media, we're handling the booking, the promotion, everything other than the thought leadership that they show up and handle. You are the king of the concierge. You're a fantastic marketer, a fantastic thought leader in marketing, podcasting, the whole thing. So I don't have a specific question other than, is it a good idea? And I'd kind of like dive into some of the practical ways I could take this idea and actually turn it into an affluent business. Any initial thoughts here?
Yeah, I have a look. I'm a cynic. I don't look for good ideas. I look for problems that can be solved. People will go out of their way to solve a problem rather than do something that's fantastical. So the first question, and you kind of summed it up there. I know what you do. The question you should be asking is this a problem to people? Is it a problem for them to actually do a podcast? So we already know that podcasts are a exponentially growing platform for medium. And we know that some of the greatest sources of media now are podcasts. You know, Joe Rogan, you've got radio shows that have gone over. So in that fact, is it becoming harder for people to be able to do their own podcast, or is it becoming easier? That's the first question I would ask myself. And then that little bit in the middle, which you hit on, the social. There's a lot of people that record podcasts and they go, right, now what? And you've really got to promote it. You've got to put it out there. And that's the missing link. I don't think today producing a podcast is that hard. Let's be blunt. If you've got a phone and a quiet room, you can probably record a podcast. But it's the other stuff. It's the editing. It's the listing. It's making sure that it's distributed. So quite simply, can you solve that problem?
Absolutely. And for this conversation, let's focus on guesting because we can do production for hosts, but really I want to focus and differentiate. I mean, we're talking about people that have built businesses, that have scaled companies, that have written books, but they don't want to jump on a call and they'll jump on a call. Let me fix this. They'll jump on a call and have a conversation, but they don't want to do the posting. As we mentioned, they don't want to do the production. And if they're on a guest tour, literally all they have to do is show up and we book them, we set them up. And part of the concierge is, who is their target audience? What hosts are thought leaders in that space? Can they set up an affiliate partnership or a partnership program with the host? Focus on the one-to-one conversation with the host. And what I'm curious about as a podcast host, I host my own show, and it's happened to me. People show up, they talk, they ghost. They never say thank you. They don't respond to texts. They never share it. What are some of the struggles you've seen as a podcast host about your guests not showing up as their best selves, not delivering value to your audience? What have you seen there? What would you change if you were a host and just have the perfect guest show up prepared?
So you're, as a concierge, you're doing both sides. You're doing the production for people and you're also getting them on shows.
We will do the production, but it's really the booking that is
Gotcha.
my main focus.
Gotcha.
It's a bit of a differentiator than anybody who can produce a show. It's more for the thought leader to use a podcast as a tour and speak for 45 minutes a week, and all they have to do is show up.
Gotcha. All right, so look, we got a few problems here, and I've actually got I've got views on either side of the fence there, because as you know, I have my own podcast, and as you know, I jump on everybody else's podcast. So here's the thing, as the guest. As the guest, it's not my job to distribute your show, okay? It's not my job to get you more listeners. My job is to give you great content. Now, there's a lot of podcasters out there, and this is where it really comes down to, and I hope you're brilliant at this, selecting the right podcasts. Because there's a lot of podcasts out there that go, hey, I'd love you to be on my show. Sure shit you would, because I know by me being on your show, you're going to get extra listeners, okay? It's like going up to the Pope and going, hey, I've never done a podcast before, but will you be on my podcast? You know full well who is benefiting, not the Pope, the person who's got the podcast. So when you're selecting the podcast, I always like to look at what promotion do you do for the guests, okay? If you do none, for a start, I more than likely won't even be on the show. But based on what you actually do for the guests, I'm going to reciprocate. Okay, so I often say to a lot of people, look, if you want me on your show and you want to throw a feed up on Instagram or something and tag me as a collaborator, I'll accept and share it through mine because you've done the editing, you've done the design, you've done the layout, you've taken the time, and I'll put it up there. You know, John Gafford, Ryan Pineda, these people have all used me, Greg Reed, and had me as collaborators, and I'm very happy to do it because they put time into it. So as a guest, you have a number of commitments that you've got to give. One, you've got to be spectacular entertainment. You've got to be educating all the way through, and you've got to provide content that's going to benefit the audience. I've had people before that have come on as guests and they thought it was a half-hour pitch fest on their diet tablets. And, of course, very easily you just go, oh, sorry, I've got technical issues. We'll rebook another time. And, of course, you never do. So you've got to make sure that you've got content, not an advert. You've got to make sure that the person doing the podcast is actually showing up. So your job as a concierge, I would say, that would make me interested is for you to be able to turn around and go, hey, I've got this selection of podcasts that I'd like to book you on, because they've met the metrics that we've been specific on to be able to distribute your podcast. The podcast is one thing. The distribution is everything. So I make sure that they distribute. And if they're distributing, and I just rolled off some names, Greg Reed, Ryan Pineda, John Gafford, Bradley, when these people are spending so much time in the production and the editing of the video, then it now becomes your commitment and responsibility to reciprocate it and share it around as well. Because here's the thing. Big podcasts want to see how much ego you're carrying. And if you're actually promoting other people's podcasts, then they go, all right, they distribute. They're not only a podcast guest, they also get involved in the marketing. And then you instead of you sitting there and bitching and moaning and going, oh, I never get onto big podcasts, by showing what you do with all podcasts, you will.
Makes perfect sense.
Is that one of the services you do?
Book people on the podcast?
Yeah, but do you have a metrics of how active they are at distribution?
The host itself, you're asking.
Yes, you have that?
I don't have a specific system built right now. It's more just the lurking system that, for example, one of my clients is all about LinkedIn. Are they posting specifically on LinkedIn? How many connections do they have? I go to listennotes.com. What is their ranking for the podcast? I don't have a specific system. It's more just the lurking research phase. If you have any line items that I could add to my research to systematize it, I'm open ears.
We just did. So
okay.
You know, that's what I'm saying. So why don't we look at this? You know, if you've got a guest and you want to book him on podcasts and you know these 10 podcasts, then why don't you come up with a line sheet? And I'm only asking you this because I've never been given it. All right. So this would excite me for you to be able to turn around and go, hey, I've got these 10 guests, these 10 hosts. By the way, each one of them has had the box ticked on editing. Like, here's a classic thing. I will get people going, hey, you're a brilliant podcast. Here's the, it goes out on Tuesday. Here's some artwork for you to be able to distribute. Okay. Nobody likes artwork anymore. They like video clips. They like sound bites. Okay. So when I get a little poster of you with my little picture up in the corner going, join me on Tuesday when I interview this fellow up in the corner, I'm not posting it. But if I get a video from you and there's a clip of us on a podcast and I'm able to take that clip and upload it, and I've got pre-edited, pre-designed, even though your mug's all over it and your banner and your logo, I've now got shareable content that makes me look interesting. I will share that. So if you had a little tick box going, yes, they distribute on pictures only, or they distribute and will supply video edited content, yes, they will connect with you as a collaborator on Instagram. If you had those kind of things, it would make me go, well, okay, I can see what they do, and that's what I like. So I'm just thinking, what internal problems do I have as a guest that I want answered before I accept that position? Now, there's a caveat to that. People that have not been on a lot of podcasts, get on every podcast. You know, I don't even give a shit if it's your first podcast, because it's not so much about the podcast you're on as it is about practicing your message.
Right.
You've got to rehearse. It's like when you're a comedian, you won't go and headline at a comedy store. You'll go and do some shitty little gigs to rehearse your stuff. That's what you've got to do. If you're new to podcasting and somebody has a podcast, that's the end of the research. Get on it. You know, please can I get on it? Beg, borrow, promise them anything you like. Just get on that bloody podcast. Now, if you start getting busier, you want to make sure it's worthwhile. You want to make sure the distribution's there. That's when you focus on all those metrics. And I've never, ever, ever had anyone come to me going, hey, this is the marketing metrics that they do afterwards. You know, just that simple bullet. Do they provide pictures? Yes. Well, maybe you don't want pictures. Do they provide videos as well? Yes. Great. Now I've got content. Do they share you as a collaborator post? Do they tag you? How often will they do it? Do they do 3 podcasts a week? Therefore, you're only up there for 2 minutes. Right. Do they do 1 a week? And therefore, you're up for 3 times that week? Those kind of things would make it very interesting, because I have to admit, I haven't seen that. And as a concierge, that shows you're going above and beyond what people can find pretty much everywhere else.
I love it, Steve. One clarifying question to let you expand on this. This will help me because I guest on shows. This will help any of my clients, and this will help anyone listening. You mentioned, you know, you're a comedian. You want to get practice at the little. You want to do as much stand up as possible. You want to prepare. You want to get the skill set down. Earlier, you had mentioned to bring value. This might be a stupid question, but how does someone bring value? And I understand you mentioned Brad Lee. He says there is no key. It's a combination lock, and we all have our own combination. I'm curious, what is Steve's combination? So you're going to guest on a show. How do you bring value? Because it's great to just say, show up, be energetic, and bring value. How the hell do we do that?
So anytime anybody asks me to be on a show, the first thing I'll do is say, thank you very much for the interest. Who's your audience? That's the first question I ask every single time. Who's your audience? Okay. And then hopefully they'll give me the big details. Well, you know, 20% might. Now, bear in mind, you don't, as many stats are out there, you don't know who the shit's listening to it. You know, it could be your mum could be subscribed, but it's your sister listening to it. So there's never going to be 100% accuracy. You can't turn around and go, well, 83% of my market is male and the other is female. You just can't, but you can get a guide. It's entrepreneurs, pretty much a younger community. Okay, great. So get those basics. In your interaction with them, what have been the problems that they've had, or what have been the programs and podcasts that you've actually had that have got the most reaction? Okay. And we had this guy that was on Instagram posting. It blew up. Everyone loved that. Great. So I'm now going to focus my message around Instagram and how Instagram has helped me grow my business. So try to find out who the audience is and speak to them. Now, in that clarification, you may actually realize this ain't my crowd. I don't have the value. It's brain surgeons. I don't know anything about brain surgery, but I know about stress. So maybe I talk about stress on that podcast, or I know about time management, or I know about prioritizing family, maybe I speak on that. But if you don't have anything that you can give to the audience, it's better to not show up than show up wrong. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem. A lot of people, and I've done this many times, a lot of people will go, hey, I get to be on a podcast, I'm on it. And they'll jump on there, and for 30 minutes, the audience will be thinking, oh, who the bloody hell's this? Because you're not adding to my value. And then the host looks stupid because they shouldn't have brought them on. It's usually going to be the end of the podcast they ever do, because that may be on that 5th episode and they've just got the wrong guest. So you should always ask, okay, who's your audience? Who are you talking to? You will be able to see from the stats where the geographics are. Well, most of my market's actually in Finland. Okay, it's in Finland. If it's in Finland and you do live events in Miami, may not be a good market for you, because no one's going to fly from Finland to come to your event in Miami. But if you're doing online work, geographically, it doesn't matter anymore. So do get a lot more specific with the actual marketplace.
To extend on that, so you show up, it's not a good fit. If you're at a bar and it's a stranger and they're hitting on you out of the blue, I need to use the restroom, make a phone call, I got to leave, you leave. If you're there, booked to be there, it's in your calendar, you show up, you realize it's not a good fit, how do you tactically, and it doesn't have to be on a podcast per se, how do you tactically walk away from situations like that without pissing anybody off?
Well, the good thing is 2 things. 1, you don't have to be tactful there. And 2, the beauty about podcasts is they're recorded. Okay? So in which case, if you're going through a recording, you go, hang on a minute, Ben. When we spoke via email, you told me about this audience, but the questions I'm getting, this isn't my expertise. 2 things are going to happen. I'm going to look dumb, and your clientele, your listeners, your audience are going to be aggravated because you brought me onto a show, wasted 30 minutes of their life by giving them nothing. So I kind of think this may be a good idea for us to just go delete and pretend that this Tuesday morning didn't happen. What do you think? And you've got to do that. Today, you've got to protect your brand. Okay? If you're saying the wrong thing to the wrong audience, it's brand detrimental. Okay? So protect yourself. You've also got to protect the brand of your host. If your host is asking questions and you're going down the wrong path, or you can't answer them, or it's got nothing to do with you, and you've got your host going, hey, Steve, can you tell me about hair products? No. Stupid question was that? Of course I can't. You've got to protect your brand integrity for you, the host, and more importantly, the audience. So don't worry about being tactful. Just be prepared to be honest and just go, look, hang on. Whoa, this isn't going to be good for you. Ain't going to be good for me. And it's going to piss your 10 listeners off. So we may best forget this actually happened. And I've done that. I've actually done that. I've got into interviews where and usually what I found was you would get these interviews and they would go, hey, can I speak with you the week before? All right. Okay. Now, I don't do that too often because, time's money and we don't have a lot of it around. But quite often I would speak to someone, and quite often the person I would be speaking to would be the producer, wouldn't be the host. The producer has a different tone, a different speed, a different concept of how the show's going to be than the host that woke up that morning all raged up on coke and going, yeah, Steve, we're going to do this. And you're like, whoa, hang on a minute. That's a different tempo to what I got last week. So you've really got to focus on that. And usually I'll just chat away with someone, just like we did at the beginning of the show. I'll chat away with someone for a few minutes just to pick up on what's coming, how's it going to be before I actually press record. But I would definitely say protect your brand. You can't get it back, okay? You really can't. So protect it and protect the audience and then protect the show in that order.
Love it. Got time for one more?
Give us another one.
Well, as a concierge, a big part of what you did is bridge the gap. It's a big part of what you do. You bridge the gap. So let's say in a scenario, I'm booking a guest to be on a podcast. I am the producer bridging the gap, having that conversation because possibly my client doesn't have time for a 30-minute discovery call. How do I come in and ensure that I represent my client properly and don't come with a completely different energy and a different mission? And so when the client and the host meet, I didn't do what you just described. Is there certain ways to avoid that disaster scenario? And hopefully none of my clients are going to be hopped up on coke, so that won't be a problem. But let's just assume it could possibly be. Well, what would you say to that?
So a concierge, people need to understand by pure definition, is someone that over-delivers and overthinks. You know, a concierge is not a transaction. You take on a concierge to outsource your creativity. You know, I need this done. Let me get this concierge. Whether it be a medical concierge, whether it be a travel concierge, whether it be a podcast concierge, that concierge is there to go above and beyond what you would normally consider doing, overthinking. So you've got to fill in the gaps that they didn't even know were there. But also at the same time, you've got to be a phenomenal mimic. If I'm actually speaking to someone and I'm talking about my client who is a technical rocket science, then as I speak to you, I am actually going to reduce my tone and I am going to try to mimic the tempo and the tonality that's going to come to them when they do the podcast. If I've got a comedian, I'm going to be like, you've got to, this guy's hysterical. You've got to try and mimic the person so you can at least try and mirror the reaction that that person's going to have when that client actually turns up. So you've got to be a ventriloquist. You've really got to be able to bring your clients' enthusiasm. And if you can't, get a little video clip of the client and go, hey, I want to speak to you about my client. He can't make it, but here's a clip of him speaking on stage. Here's a clip of him doing, and the beauty about podcasts is you can send him other podcasts and go, here's a couple of other podcasts he's been on. Then you haven't got to mimic it because they've got to see it firsthand how that person comes over onto the airwaves.
I love it. I let you going from computer scientist to comedian, just the tonality, words not even mattering, just cracked me up, Steve. I guess my closing question thought is the magic wand question. What didn't I ask you on this topic that if you could spit out something that we didn't tackle today that would help really anyone who's looking to guest on shows? It's not my client. It's not me. It's not just you. Anybody in the community that we can help. What else would you tell them to give them a little bit of inspiration? Well, honestly, it doesn't even have to be inspirational. You tell me.
Well, I don't think it's inspirational, but it's definitely actionable. What's the point? Okay, that's one question I ask myself on everything I do. What's the point? If you're getting on podcasts, is it because you like the sound of your own voice, or is it because you're selling books, or is it because you're selling courses? Are you selling coaching? Are you selling an event? You know, what is the point? If there's no point, don't go on, okay? Because there's going to be no call to action. So what is your point, and understand that? And I suppose one of the magic tips is always try to provide an actionable track to you within the first 3 minutes of any conversation. So you can always turn around and go, Ben, brilliant question. In fact, I talk about that on steveDsims.com. But let's go into that in more detail. Just do a soft drop at the beginning. And the way I put it is you always wait until the end. And the host is always the person, never me, but the host is always the one that goes, hey, Ben, appreciate you being on the show. How do my listeners get hold of you? Now, that's the secret sign for the listeners to turn off and fast forward to the next one. Okay? So drop it in the first 3 minutes. It's like going to a movie, and probably the classic one is Marvel now. If you've noticed, Marvel always do like a little bit of video right at the end of the credits now. Why? To keep you there through the credits. I don't know why. You're not going to bloody read them. But no one ever watches the credits. The second the credits start going up, everyone buggers off outside the movie. So always, as a podcast guest, drop a soft direct within the first 3 minutes and ask yourself, what's the point? You don't have one? Don't do a podcast.
Love it.
Did that help, Ben?
Yeah, Steve.
Well, I appreciate you're part of the Sims Distillery and Speakeasy family. I'm glad to have you on this coaching call because these are here so that someone else out there can go, I've got the same problem as Ben, or I've got the same idea as Ben, and you've just been able to position it to help answer your problem and theirs.
Thanks again, Steve. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you.
Cheers, pal. Look after yourself. Bye.
Cheers.
Hey, this is Steve Sims, and I hope you liked that episode of Being Coached by Steve Sims. Subscribe over here, watch some other cool videos over here, or for your chance to be coached by me for the YouTube series, join here at simsdistillery.com.